welcome to Victor George Leather Goods Knife Sheath School Volume 9. And I hope everybody's Independence Day celebration was wonderful. We're back in the shop, back at work. And today I'm going to show you the complete pattern process, fabrication process to build these very popular pancake style knife sheaths. Angle slotted, vertical zero cant slotted. I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to design one of these yourself. These are very popular, and by the time you get through watching this video, you're going to know exactly how to make one. In this particular case, I replicated the look of a holster with a patch and a sweat shield, but those are options that you don't have to do. I just am silly that way. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's get into the pattern process that I use for these very popular pancake angled belt slotted knife sheath. So, you know, these are available through all kinds of, I think Tandy, Maker's Leather Supply has these templates, which are very popular and easy to use. But the only problem that I have with these is that they're all the same, and I'd kind of like to show you my style of drawing a pattern for these. So this is going to be for a right forward cant pancake sheath. So I'm going to do it with a buck 110. So the first thing that I do is I take it and I make sure that the knife is in a position of function so that when you pull it, it's in your hand. You don't have to do any manipulating. It's like this, and now just flip it onto your paper. Take a pencil and do a accurate tracing of the knife shape in its folded position. Okay, simple enough. Now, this is easy enough to self-center. So just take a ruler, find pretty much the center of that folded knife, draw your line. Now, for grasping the knife from the sheath, it doesn't usually take but a couple of fingers. So we're gonna do about an inch and a half, okay? That'll work. You can do whatever you like. I'm just gonna do a cross line, and that's gonna get us started. And now what we need to do is this is gonna be a flat build and then wet molded into its final shape. So I take a pair of digital calipers, and you can do the same thing with a single double stack magazine. The concept is exactly the same. So I'm going to turn this thing on, and I'm going to put it into inch mode, and I'm going to take a measurement of the width of the blade. So I'm getting here 62.25. All right, so 6.6265, and I'm going to divide that by 2, and 0.6265 divided by 2 equals 0.3132. 0.3132 inches, okay? Now we're going to zero that again, and we're going to find 3132. Enough. That thing up and then shut it off. I don't really need it. Now this establishes our stitch line for this flat to fat mold sheath. You can do this however you want. You can just take these jaws here and give yourself your stitch line, and once I have that from this line up, I'm going to go straight up, use the center line. And that, and then connect the dots. And I'm just doing this to show you the concept. And I'm satisfied with that. So now I am going to take a graph see-through ruler, and I'm going to give myself a 1/4 inch perimeter, but only around the bottom, and you'll see why that comes into play later. So using my favorite method, I'm just going to give myself this is the perimeter of the sheath, and these are just the measurements that I like to use. All right, that's really all you need. And as you can see here, to get a better visual, if you need, that gives you your bottom. All right, so now these acrylic holster designing templates are from parkerleathergoods@gmail.com. J.R. Parker, he doesn't have a website, but if you contact him by email and you want to get you a set of these are perfect for holster design. I use them for sheath making, and they have these wonderful ears with different slot sizes. So 1.5, 2 inches, and 1 3/4 inches. These things are wonderful. Get you a set. Tell them Victor George sent you. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to establish our slot locations for this particular style sheath. And from the stitch line, you can do almost anything you want. For just as a quick example, on this basic utility pouch, there was only 3/8 of an inch from the stitch line to the center of the slot. And you can go 3/8, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 7/8 inch if you like. You might have to do these a couple of times until you get the style that you like. But anyway, here's the way I do it. So from the stitch line, I am going to go, say, 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to put that 3/4 of an inch line on the stitch line up here, and I'm going to draw myself a line down here. And I'm going to do the same on this side. And all this does is it just shows you a different way of designing these. I've never been a real good drawer, so I have to use these templates, measurements, and grid patterns to help me. All right, so these are the slot locations. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it as an angled sheath. So the first thing I'm going to do, turn this around again, makes it easy to follow. So I'm going to take my slot and I'm going to center it probably in this configuration here, and I'm just going to draw my slot and my ear, and you only have to do the outside ear. Okay, and then I'm going to come down here, and at this point here, do whatever angle that you want. I'm going to eyeball about a 13 to 15 degree angle, and I'm going to center it on that line, and I'm going to draw, I'll try to do it without turning around. I know that's annoying. And then my outside ear. All right, so now I have the ears, and now it's just nothing more than taking a French curve or a flexible ruler to design the top. And in this case, I'm just going to do your standard flowing and then come up and then sort of connect these ears like that. And that's pleasing enough to me. Again, erase that, draw it until you're happy. All right, that gives you that nice little flow. And then from the base of the ear, all you're going to do is connect it here in a soft transition. And then you can do the same thing here. And again, you can use whatever devices you need to make this easier for you. All right, this right here is your basic pancake style sheath, and in this case for $1.10, and that's all there is to it. So we're going to take our basic pancake style pocket knife scabbard, and we're going to replicate the look of a holster. And the best way to do that, so let me show you here on this completed pattern, is I am going to include here a sweat shield and a patch. And I think that's going to be a pretty cool little feature on this thing. So the way we do that now is we take our pattern and we draw in however we like a sweat shield. And everything's smooth, corners. And flow in there. So this line here, I'm not real, it's a little bit wide. So we'll come down here a little bit closer. And again, draw that until you're satisfied with that. Now, the patch is nothing more than on the inside of the stitch lines. This is going to be a third piece. So this is going to be a 3-piece flat to fat pattern. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to go just inside the stitch lines, and I'm going to give myself the start of my patch, and I'm going to go here on the inside of the stitch line on this side, just a little bit inside there, and I'm going to give myself another line. And now all I'm going to do is connect these. And as you can sort of see that happening. Okay, so we have our main body, we have our patch, we have our sweat shield. I'm going to cut this out into 3 pieces once we start the fabrication stage, and I'm going to show you how that's done. All right, so that is basically it. Now, if you want to draw a vertical carry, 0 degree cant, I'll show you that here real quick. Let me just show you real quick a vertical carry, 0 degree cant. This one again has 3/8 of an inch from the stitch line to the slot. And we're going to do an inch on this vertical carry. So real quickly, we went ahead and did all the preliminary stuff, the stitch line, the 1/4 inch border sheath, and I'm going to go from the stitch line, and in this particular case, I'm going to go 1 inch to the center of the slot. And I'll just draw that down. We'll do the same thing from here. We're going to go 1 inch to the slot. Then it's nothing more than using this horizontal line as your guide, and you can do 2 things. You can put the top of the slot on that line, or you can put that down there, however you like. And this is your design process, and you might have to build a few of these until you get it just exactly the way you want it. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here. We'll replicate that side exactly. Center that line on your slot. Okay, now in this particular case, you just have to softly connect these with a little bit of a, again, this is just for demonstration purposes. Just use anything you want and flow these lines together. And that'll give you your top. And then of course we're gonna flow these in together. And that is your vertical carry patterning. You can adjust the slots into any carry degree that you want. Get you a set of those, and it'll make life a lot easier for you. Let's go ahead and start the build on this holster style sheath that we just drew for you, and let's get that started. So now what I did was I went ahead and punched the interior stitch line with a 5mm stitching punch or stitching iron, and I cut out my slots using a oblong punch. This one I got from Texas Custom Dies. And if you don't have one of those, then you just use the hole punch and cut method, and it's nothing more, obviously, than using a punch and then cutting these lines out with a razor knife. Let's go ahead and cut the pattern out and transfer it to layer. We cut the pattern out from our stock paper, and we went ahead and cut out the sweat shield as well. Now this is going to be our back piece. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip it over onto the back, and we're going to find the leather of our choice. In this particular case, you can get away with a firm 6/7, 7/8, 8/9 weight leather. Don't trace the stitch lines or anything else on this back piece. Trace it out and leave that for later. Now we take our pattern and we just cut out the sweat shield part. And this is a good opportunity if you're not thoroughly pleased with a line or two, you can cut it to where you want it a little bit more pleasing. And now we have the front face. We're gonna go ahead and set that down and trace it this side up, the pattern side up, because this is going to be for a right hand forward cant sheath. Just trace it out. And on this top piece, I go ahead and draw out my pieces like that. And now you can take, I'll show you a different method, but now you can just give yourself some little dots here that indicate your stitch line. Oop, there we go. All right, so now we have our front face piece. We have the slot locations established. And I do this all in pen because you're gonna cut the line directly splitting that ink line, and then you're gonna edge away any leftover line. I like that a lot better because I can see it getting older, so it helps. Then I establish my stitch line, and that's that. Now I take the pattern and I cut out my patch. And again, now's a good time to clean up any lines that you're not happy with. And we have our patch. And we're just gonna put that on there, that side up. And again, this could be shark skin, this could be veg tanned, it could be any exotic totally up to you. Now we have all three pieces cut onto leather for this holster style pancake knife sheath. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these out and then we'll be back. Overview of the steps that I've taken since I cut out the pattern to leather. So the very first thing I do is I take salon board or any kind of sandpaper and I just clean up my edges, make sure they're all flush, 90 degrees, and attractive. On my patch piece, I went ahead and sanded, edged, dyed, and burnished these two sides. The top piece will be raw because it'll be placed onto here. And again, remember this holster style is optional, what I'm showing you here. All right, so that's ready to go. And I went ahead and used a 4mm on the patch just to give it a little bit of stitch contrast. And then I took the initial prick lines of the sheath face that I did, and I went ahead and punched them out with my 5mm stitching iron. I took my wing dividers, did the exterior stitch line, and went ahead and punched those as well. I do like a little bit of a double row stitching in certain places. All right, now to establish the glue lines, and here's the alternative method, is you take the pattern that we initially started with and you cut it out right on the stitch lines, kind of like a perforated stamp. And then you just turn it over and you place that on there and then trace out your line, which is your glue line. And then you do the same thing on the front, or I'm sorry, on the back piece, and that gives you your stitch lines. All right, that's your alternative method, and you could also have done that on the front as well. All right, so now what I'm gonna do off camera is I'm going to take my patch and I'm going to glue and sew that directly onto the front face, and then we'll come back for the final glue up, and we're getting close. I assume that you have some basic leathercraft skills, so I'm taking this a little bit shorter than normal. All right, let's press on. Went ahead and sewed the patch on, again using the 4mm, and after I sewed it, I tapped the stitches flat, and that filled all the holes. Speaking of that, probably the nicest thread that I found so far. They do have now a braided thread from Main Thread Company, and they have these little courtesy sheets to show you the colors and the thread sizes, and these work really wonderful. Contact them for a good quality thread. Ritz is also good. Maker's Leather Supply also has a nice type of a braided thread. But anyway, this is now patched on, sewed, and the top has been sanded flush right here where the patch ends, and burnished. Okay, now the only thing we have left to do, and I'm going to show you some tricks to dress up these slots a little bit. So now the only thing we have to do is glue outside these lines on both sides, glue this piece together and sew it, and that's what I'm going to do next, and I'll be back with that done. All right, let's take a quick overview of what we've done so far. I went ahead and punched out my holes. You can do this with the stitching iron itself, with an awl, or with your Dremel drill press. So once you establish your holes, you start sewing. Now, I just did the interior stitch line first. So this is going to take all the stress during the wet molding process, because remember, this is a flat build prior to molding. So stitch the interior, double tack at both ends. That'll handle the stress that we're about to place on it once we do that. Anyway, now I'm going to go ahead and continue sewing the outside perimeter, and then we'll get ready for the molding process. While I'm sewing the sheath, I wanted to show you a little sewing aid that I've used for decades. In this particular case, it's aluminum stock. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. Has a very good flex strength for when you're sewing. I place it into my vise as such at the angle that makes me happy while I stand, and now I can sew. The thread hangs freely without getting caught in hardware. I don't have to manipulate the sheath. The sheath doesn't get banged up into the clamps. I have my stitching pliers handy here within reach, and I sew away from myself, so I'm not the traditional saddle stitcher. I learned on my own many years ago before I even realized that there was a way. I don't groove my stitch lines. The thread of today is strong enough to seat deeply into the leather, and I don't do a I think it's called a cast stitch. Mine's just your typical in and out. I've never lost a thread or a stitch, so learn how to do it the correct way. I'm just showing you primarily the aid here, and I will finish this off camera. The sheath is completely sewn, and now all that's left to do is true up our edges. And again, I use these flap wheels sanders, and we're just going to go ahead and true them up real quick. Then I'll show you how we cut out the slots. So I'll show you this for just a minute or two. I've shown this on, I think, a couple of the other videos. And one thing to consider when you're designing your pattern is so that you have the curvatures here, the inside curves that fit into your sanding wheels. Of course, you can use a Dremel sanding wheel too for all the really tight inside curves, but that'll help. All right, let's move on. So we've sanded the edges, and now I'm going to take a large edger and I'm going to clean up the perimeter. This is going to also cut off the last of my ink line, and I like this rounded effect that it gives me. All right, edges are all done, nice and smooth. Now I'm going to go ahead and moisten and burnish and cut out my slots, and I'll show you all these steps, and then we're ready. Best way to cut out your slots is to have one of these large oblong punches. I place it in my 2-ton arbor press. Make sure it's 90 degrees, make sure the slots are in the initial hole. I press down the wheel, and then I just also make sure that I have a piece of cardstock below the sheath, because on these poly boards they get cut up and it's going to leave marks. So let's punch this out. And we have a very nice slot. Now I'm going to take you to the bench and I'm going to punch these out with the hole punch and a tool that I've made that helps that step. All right, so we just punched out this slot on the arbor press. It's a clean slot, and if you don't have the advantage of that, then just get a hole punch and force it up into the corner or into the rounded corner there, and make sure it's perfect size, 90 degrees. Cut that hole out, turn it around to the other end, force it up into that corner, make sure it's 90 degrees, and cut out. All right, now we have that. Now I've taken these old high carbon steel putty knives and I've put them on my grinder and gave them a razor's edge. They work good as skivers and as cutters, but in this particular case, I like this because I can put the tool flush up against the edge like this, that corner into the hole, and then I just push straight down, and then I move it up a little bit and push straight down. Okay, so the 90 degree by using this tool gives you a nice slot. Now, I will say that for your back edges on the slot, there is a tool for edging your slots. And it looks just like that. Douglas Tools has them. I will admit that they're a little bit pricey, and the best way to go about doing that is just like this. And that lets you get into that corner. And that lets you edge your slots. There's really no other tool that I've found that can replicate that. So this is a tool that will help you down the road. And if you're going to do a lot of slotted type of goods, then it's worth the money. So now to really dress up our slots, there's two things that I need to do. Number one is a lot of my customers are concealed carry clients, and I make double wide gun belts. Now these single slot punches are usually about 1/4 inch thick, and they don't make it to where these slide in. So the ideal slot is 3/8 inches wide, and again, a very expensive tool. So what I have done to eliminate that need is I've taken a tapered wooden paintbrush handle. I sanded off the shellac and basically impregnated the wood with beeswax. And now all I do is I take my slots, the sheath and the slots have been moistened slightly, and I start burnishing the slots like this. And I just go from corner to corner. And as I'm burnishing, I'm pushing the tapered tool in more and more. And I just keep doing that until I get a nice, and then you have little leather fibers here because I'm using lower end leather, but you can take some sandpaper, sand those off. But just go on both sides, keep doing that, and eventually, as you can see here, the slot enlarges and it fits the double lined belt so much more. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the slots burnishing off camera, and we'll come back. So now we're ready to do the final wet molding. Again, we're going to go from flat to fat, and what I do is I take water and saddle soap, and that helps to lubricate the fibers. We're going to go ahead and open the sheath up a little bit. Now I will tell you that once we start the process, it's going to be snug, and that's what we want. So let's open that up a little bit and go ahead and set it in the water. Lukewarm water, not hot. 8 to 15 seconds. I don't usually count. It's just a guesstimate. All right, so I'm going to let that sit in there and turn it over a little bit. And let that moisture seep into the fibers. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. Sometimes I'll do this and then I'll stick it into a plastic bag and let it quick case, and other times I'm in a hurry and I don't. Either way works out. I didn't count, so we're going to let that water flash. And what I mean by flash is just let that water come back to the surface. Now remember that I am not using the absolute Primus leather. You should if you want your product to be absolutely perfect. All right, so I'm going to let that just sit and flash to its natural color, probably be about 5 minutes. It is ready to be molded. I did notice that my back piece is a little bit soft and spongy. Make sure that you use good firm temper veg tan. And now let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm gonna open it up again a little bit. And I'm gonna take my knife. Now they do have molds of the Buck 110, but I just have this one that I use as my molding knife. And I don't put saran wrap on there, and I don't do anything but just take the knife and place it in there. Now it's gonna take a little bit of effort. You just work it in there. Am I on camera? Yeah. Shove it in there all the way to the bottom. Try to straighten out your knife in there a little bit. Start pushing and molding. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my thumbs and I'm going to sort of fold the wings back a little bit. Eventually we're going to place a belt in there so that they form correctly. And again, push that guy in there. Should be fairly snug. There we go. That's starting to match the pattern that we drew. The sweat shield is on there. And again, this is just for fun. Again, replicating a holster look with the sweat shield and the patch. You don't need any of that stuff. This is what I do. All right, now I do have some tools. This is a water faucet handle. I've just attached to a wooden handle, and it's very smooth. And as the leather is sort of absorbing the moisture, I always start just with my thumbs. And again, watch your nails. Take your knuckles. And you can see the knuckle alone does some nice shaping. Again, use the tool if you like. And just keep working that. And as it dries, and I'm gonna leave it in there, again, I'm gonna curl the wings a little bit. And slowly starting to get its shape. And when I do eventually pull out the knife, I'll just clean it and oil it. Again, I don't use saran wrap because that takes away from the actual size of the sheath as far as I'm concerned. We'll go ahead and let that set. In conclusion, we are finished with this pancake style, holster replica style of a pouch sheath for a right hip forward cant carry on this Buck 110 Classic. So what I like about knowing how to build these yourself is that you can literally design any style carry that you want. These patterns that are available on the market are really nice, but they limit you to what you can make. So knowing how to do this, using the templates that I showed you, just gives you more options. And that's what this game is all about. All right, so have fun. I hope you learned something from this. Please like, share, and subscribe. And let everybody know that I'm doing this. And as always, tuition is free. Thank you.